You know how sometimes life just throws curveballs at you when you least expect them? That's exactly what happened to me last year. My name is Emily Carter, and up until recently, I thought I had everything figured out, or at least enough to keep my head above water. I was a senior project manager at Titan Corp, one of those big tech companies everyone talks about because they innovate, or whatever buzzword they slap on their PR campaigns. But here's the thing. Behind all that shiny glass and polished boardrooms, Titan Corp wasn't some beacon of innovation, it was a machine. A machine run by Richard Langley, our CEO, who treated people like cogs instead of humans. I grew up in Queens, raised by a single mom who worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. She always told me, "Emily, don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough." So, yeah, I worked hard. Really hard. College scholarships, late nights studying, and eventually landing a job at Titan Corp felt like proof that I could make something of myself. And for a while it did. I even managed to raise my daughter, Lily, mostly on my own after her dad walked out when she was 2. Life wasn't perfect, but we were surviving and thriving, honestly, until Richard decided I wasn't worth keeping around anymore. Let me take you back to what my days looked like before everything went sideways. Mornings started early, like alarm clock blaring at 5 a.m. early. I'd wake up, pack Lily's lunch, she loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and drop her off at school before heading to Manhattan. The commute was brutal, but hey, that's New York for you. Once I got to Titan Corp, I dived straight into meetings, emails, and endless presentations. My team and I were working on this AI platform designed to revolutionize healthcare accessibility. It was supposed to be my magnum opus, the thing that would finally prove I belonged in that boardroom. But there was always this undercurrent of tension. You see, Richard Langley wasn't just your typical corporate shark. He was more like a great white hunting for blood. He took credit for other people's ideas without blinking an eye, and he expected everyone to kiss his ring. Or else. I tried to stay under the radar, focusing on my work and avoiding drama, but it's hard to ignore someone who makes your life miserable every chance they get. Still, I kept telling myself, "Emily, just keep your head down. You've got Lily to think about." Looking back now, I realized staying quiet only made things worse. There was this one meeting, a big one, that changed everything. We were presenting our AI prototype to investors, and I swear, I hadn't slept in days trying to perfect it. The room was packed with suits and ties, all waiting to hear how Titan Corp was going to change the world. When it was my turn to speak, I poured my heart out. I explained how this technology could save lives, reduce costs, and actually help real people, not just boost stock prices. For a moment, I thought I saw nods of approval. Maybe, just maybe, I'd finally earned their respect. Then Richard stepped in. "Oh, Richard." He interrupted me mid-sentence, cutting me off like I was nothing more than background noise. "This has been part of my vision from day one," he said, smiling smugly at the investors. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Vision? What vision? He didn't even understand half the technical jargon I'd spent months explaining to him. But there I was, standing in front of everyone, humiliated and powerless. After the meeting, he called me into his office. I remember walking in, my stomach tied in knots, wondering what fresh hell awaited me. Spoiler alert, it wasn't good news. When Richard said, "Close the door, Emily," I knew it wasn't going to end well. His tone was cold, almost bored, like he was swatting away a fly rather than firing someone who'd given him nearly a decade of her life. He didn't even look me in the eye. Instead, he shuffled papers on his desk, pretending to be busy, before dropping the bombshell. "We're restructuring," he said flatly. "Your position is no longer necessary." I wanted to scream, or cry, or throw something heavy at his smug face. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what he just said. Restructuring? Necessary? Bullshit. This wasn't about budgets or efficiency. It was personal. He didn't care about me or my work. All he cared about was power. As I walked out of his office, clutching the box of my belongings like some cliché movie scene, I realized something. Richard Langley wasn't just firing me, he was dismissing me. Like I was expendable. Like I didn't matter. And honestly, that hurt more than anything else. That night, I sat on the couch with Lily asleep upstairs, staring at the walls like they held all the answers. How was I supposed to explain this to her? How was I supposed to pay rent, buy groceries, or keep her enrolled in that amazing art class she loved so much? Every question felt heavier than the last, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. But then something inside me snapped. Anger bubbled up, hot and fierce, like lava erupting from a volcano. Richard thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash? Fine. But he had no idea who he was messing with. The next day, I started digging. At first, it was small stuff, reviewing old emails, piecing together timelines, jotting down notes about suspicious decisions Richard had made over the years. Then Mia, my best friend from work, reached out. She'd heard what happened and offered to help. Together, we uncovered evidence of illegal data harvesting tied to the very AI project I'd been working on. Turns out, Richard had been selling user data to third parties without consent. The irony? He'd fired the one person who could expose him. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? Mia introduced me to Noah Bennett, a journalist known for exposing corporate scandals. When we met at a quiet cafe downtown, I wasn't sure what to expect. Noah was older than me, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as I laid out everything. My firing, the unethical practices, the stolen data. At first, I worried he'd dismiss me as another disgruntled ex-employee looking for revenge. But then he leaned forward and said, "Emily, this isn't just your fight anymore. It's bigger than you. Bigger than Titan Corp. If we play this right, we can bring the whole house down." For the first time since Richard fired me, I felt a flicker of hope. Working with Noah gave me purpose again, a reason to keep fighting. Sure, it was risky. Every email I sent, every document I shared could have landed me in legal trouble, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice. About proving that even someone like me, a single mom from Queens, could stand up to a man like Richard Langley and win. Noah and I spent weeks gathering evidence, cross-referencing documents, and building a case against Titan Corp. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating in a way I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't just another cog in Richard's machine. I was taking control. One night, as I scrolled through files on my laptop, I stumbled across something huge. Offshore accounts linked directly to Richard. These weren't just random numbers. They were proof of money laundering, tax evasion, the works. My hands trembled as I forwarded the info to Noah. "This is it," I whispered to myself. "This is how we take him down." But with every step forward came new fears. What if Richard found out what we were doing? What if he retaliated? Those questions haunted me, especially when I tucked Lily into bed at night. She'd look up at me with those big brown eyes and ask, "Mommy, are you okay?" And I'd smile, brushing her hair back and say, "Yeah, baby, everything's going to be okay." Deep down, though, I wasn't so sure. Fighting back meant risking everything, and I wasn't ready to lose her, not for anything. You know that feeling when you finally take a stand, only to realize the fight's just getting started? That's where I was after Noah, and I published our first exposé. We posted it on this little investigative blog he runs. Nothing fancy, just a couple of paragraphs laying out Titan Corp's illegal data harvesting practices. At first, nothing happened. Crickets. I thought maybe we'd missed the mark. Or worse, that no one cared. But then, like wildfire, the article blew up online. People were outraged, sharing it everywhere, calling for answers. For a brief moment, I felt powerful, like I'd struck a blow against Richard's empire. But Richard wasn't about to let us win that easily. Within hours, Titan Corp's PR team hit back with a statement calling our claims baseless and accusing me of fabricating evidence out of spite. They painted me as some bitter ex-employee looking for revenge, and honestly it stung. Worse still, Mia got dragged into it. She was called into HR at Titan Corp, grilled about whether she'd leaked documents. When she texted me later, saying she might lose her job over this, I felt sick. This wasn't supposed to hurt innocent people. It was supposed to stop him. Guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't afford to back down now. Not when we were so close to uncovering even bigger secrets. If you've ever been targeted by trolls online, you know how ugly things can get. After the exposé went viral, my social media feeds turned into a war zone. Comments flooded in, some supportive but most downright vicious. People called me every name under the sun. Liar, fraud, terrible mother. One guy even tweeted a picture of Lily from her school play. How they found that, I'll never know, with the caption, "This is who you're hurting, Emily." It broke me, absolutely shattered me. Sitting there in my tiny apartment, reading those words, I wanted to crawl under a rock and disappear. But then something shifted. Maybe it was anger, or maybe it was desperation. I don't know, but I realized I couldn't let them win. If I caved now, Richard would walk away scot-free, and Lily would grow up in a world where men like him always came out on top. So I fought back. With Noah's help, I recorded a video addressing the accusations head-on. I talked about my years at Titan Corp, the sacrifices I'd made, and why I couldn't stay silent anymore. Then I ended with this. They can attack me all they want, but the truth isn't going anywhere. Posting that video felt like stepping off a cliff, but strangely, it also gave me strength. And guess what? People listened. Supporters rallied around me, drowning out the hate with messages of encouragement. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. Things really got intense when an anonymous tip led us to Jake Monroe, a junior analyst still working at Titan Corp. Meeting him felt surreal. He was just a kid, barely out of college, visibly nervous as he handed over a flash drive containing explosive emails linking Richard to offshore accounts. Jake admitted he'd been scared to come forward earlier, afraid of losing his job or worse. "I figured if anyone could take him down, it'd be you," he said, glancing over his shoulder like someone might jump out of the shadows any second. I appreciated his bravery, but part of me wondered if trusting him was a mistake. What if he cracked under pressure? What if he sold us out to save himself? Noah warned me not to get too attached. "The more people involved, the higher the risk," he said bluntly. He had a point, but I couldn't ignore the fact that Jake was risking everything to help us. So we kept him close, feeding him tasks that wouldn't put him directly in harm's way. Still, paranoia lingered. Every phone call, every email, felt like it could be traced back to us. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, half expecting a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Paranoia is exhausting, let me tell you. But it kept me sharp, reminded me that one wrong move could ruin everything. Betrayal cuts deep, doesn't it? Especially when it comes from someone you trusted. That's exactly what happened when Sarah Chun, a former colleague I thought was on my side, turned on me. Turns out, she'd leaked details of our investigation to Richard in exchange for protection. The irony? She'd once confided in me about how much she hated working for Titan Corp, how trapped she felt. Now here she was, selling me out to save her own skin. When I confronted her outside Titan Corp headquarters, I was shaking, not from fear but from rage. "Why, Sarah?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "After everything we've been through, how could you do this?" She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "Survival isn't about being right, Emily," she shot back, her tone icy. "It's about staying alive." Those words haunted me long after she walked away. How had Richard gotten to her? Or maybe the real question was, how hadn't I seen it coming? That betrayal forced me to rethink everything, who I could trust, how far I was willing to go, and whether I was truly prepared for the consequences of taking him down. Spoiler alert, I was. But damn, it hurt. You know that moment when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the only way forward is to jump, even though you're terrified of what's waiting at the bottom? That's exactly how I felt as Noah and I prepared to release our most damning evidence. We'd spent weeks piecing together bank statements, emails, and internal memos that tied Richard directly to illegal financial maneuvers. It was a treasure trove of corruption, and we were about to drop it like a bombshell during Titan Corp's annual shareholders meeting. Timing was everything. If we timed it wrong, Richard could sweep it under the rug before anyone noticed. The night before the release, I barely slept. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if someone hacked us again? What if Richard found out and retaliated before we could act? Worst of all, what if Lily got caught in the crossfire? I kept picturing her face, imagining how scared she'd be if anything happened to me. But then I reminded myself why I was doing this, not just for revenge, but for justice. For every person Richard had crushed under his heel, for every lie he told to climb higher. As dawn broke, I looked in the mirror and whispered to myself, "You've come too far to turn back now." And with that, I hit send on the email that would change everything. Chaos erupted almost instantly. Just hours after releasing the exposé, We discovered that someone, likely Sarah or one of Richard's goons, had hacked into our shared files and deleted key pieces of evidence. Panic set in. Without that proof, our entire case against Titan Corp could collapse. Noah and I scrambled to recover the data, working late into the night while Jake risked his neck sneaking back into Titan Corp servers to retrieve backup copies. It was surreal, watching Jake put himself in danger for something he believed in. He wasn't some corporate hotshot. He was just a kid who wanted to do the right thing. When he finally called to say he'd secured the files, relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. News broke that Titan Corp's stock price had plummeted due to rumors of corruption swirling online. People were losing money, jobs were at stake, and the media circus was in full swing. I couldn't help but wonder, was I responsible for ruining lives too? The guilt weighed heavily on me, but I reminded myself of the bigger picture. If we didn't stop Richard now, he'd keep destroying people without a second thought. I'll never forget walking into that ballroom at the luxury hotel where Titan Corp held its annual shareholders meeting. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of anticipation and dread. Richard stood at the podium, delivering a confident speech about temporary setbacks and unfounded accusations. His voice boomed through the room, smooth and calculated, like nothing could touch him. Watching him, I felt a surge of anger so intense it nearly overwhelmed me. How dare he stand there, lying through his teeth, acting like he was untouchable. Then it happened. Mid-speech, Noah live-streamed our exposé onto every screen in the venue. Explosive evidence flashed across giant monitors, emails showing Richard approving unethical practices, offshore accounts hiding millions in stolen funds, and testimony from whistleblowers detailing his crimes. Gasps rippled through the crowd as chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions, investors demanded answers, and board members began distancing themselves from Richard faster than you could blink. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and said the words I'd been waiting months to say. "It's me, Richard. The woman you fired without a second thought." For once, he looked shaken. Victory tasted sweet, but it wasn't over yet. In the days following the shareholders' meeting, Titan Corp unraveled faster than anyone expected. Law enforcement raided their headquarters, seizing documents and freezing assets. Media outlets relentlessly covered the scandal, painting Richard as the poster child for corporate greed and corruption. Everywhere I went, people recognized me, the whistleblower who took down a titan of industry. Some praised me, calling me brave and inspiring. Others accused me of ruining lives. Either way, I couldn't escape the spotlight, no matter how much I wanted to. But fame came at a cost. Lily struggled to adjust to the attention, begging me to make it stop. One evening, as we sat on the couch eating pizza, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and asked, "Why can't we just go back to normal?" My heart broke hearing those words. Normal? What even was normal anymore? Still, I hugged her tight and promised to protect her no matter what. "We're safe now, baby," I whispered, even though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. Richard may have fallen, but his reach extended further than any of us realized. And deep down, I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, Richard resurfaced with one last, desperate attempt to discredit me. He leaked fabricated evidence, suggesting I'd embezzled funds from Titan Corp years ago. Suddenly, headlines shifted, questioning my motives and integrity. Public opinion wavered slightly, with some wondering if I'd orchestrated the whole thing out of greed rather than justice. The backlash stung, especially since I'd sacrificed so much to expose the truth. Doubt crept in, whispering cruel lies. What if they believe him? What if all this was for nothing? But giving up wasn't an option. With Noah's support, I recorded another video addressing the accusations. I laid bare my journey, from being fired unjustly to uncovering Titan Corp's dark secrets, all while reaffirming my commitment to doing what's right. If I wanted revenge, I said, staring straight into the camera, I wouldn't have fought this hard to bring the truth to light. This isn't about me, it's about holding power accountable. Posting that video felt like stepping into the arena again, vulnerable and exposed, but it worked. Supporters rallied around me once more, drowning out Richard's lies with messages of solidarity. Slowly, the tide turned back in our favor. Finally, the day came when Richard faced justice head-on. Arrested at his penthouse apartment, he looked broken, Nothing like the powerful man who'd once ruled Titan Corp with an iron fist. Cameras flashed outside as cops led him away in handcuffs, and reporters shouted questions he ignored. At his trial, I sat in the courtroom, listening as prosecutors presented irrefutable evidence of his crimes. When it was his turn to speak, Richard glared at me with pure hatred and spat, "You think this is over? I'll make sure you never work in the city again." His words should have scared me, but they didn't. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace. No matter what threats he made, I'd already won. Not just against him, but against the system that allowed men like him to thrive unchecked. As the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Richard Langley, the man who tried to destroy me, was finally going to prison. And while it didn't erase the pain he'd caused, it proved something important. Even the mightiest fall when enough people stand together. The days after Richard's conviction felt surreal, like stepping out of a storm into calm air. 4 months, my life had been consumed by anger, fear, and determination. Now, suddenly, it was over. Titan Corp was dismantled, its assets redistributed to charitable causes aligned with the AI healthcare project I dreamed of creating. Reporters still hounded me for interviews, but I turned most of them down. Fame wasn't what I wanted. It never had been. What I craved was quiet moments with Lily, away from cameras and questions. Still, the spotlight forced me to confront parts of myself I'd buried long ago. One afternoon, an old memory surfaced, my dad walking out when I was 6, leaving Mom to raise me alone. He called once, years later, apologizing and asking if we could reconnect. Back then, I'd hung up on him, too hurt to forgive. But now, sitting in my tiny kitchen watching Lily color at the table, I wondered if holding on to that resentment had done more harm than good. So, I picked up the phone and dialed his number. When he answered, his voice trembled. "Emily, is that really you?" We talked for hours, sharing pieces of our lives we'd missed. By the end of the call, he promised to visit soon. Forgiveness isn't easy, but sometimes it's worth the effort. With Richard behind bars and Titan Corp dissolved, I finally had space to focus on what mattered most, my daughter and my dreams. The nonprofit organization funding my AI healthcare project offered me a leadership role, and though part of me hesitated, afraid of failing or being judged, I accepted. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore, it was about making a difference. Every line of code, every algorithm, every test run brought us closer to revolutionizing healthcare accessibility for underserved communities. What surprised me most was the team that formed around me. Former Titan Corp employees, inspired by my fight against injustice, joined the project. Jake, who'd risked everything to help expose Richard, became one of my closest collaborators. "I used to think I didn't matter," he admitted during a brainstorming session. "But working here makes me feel like I do." His words stuck with me, reminding me why I'd fought so hard in the first place. Change isn't just about tearing down bad systems, it's about building better ones. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. A few weeks later, I attended Richard's sentencing hearing. Sitting in that courtroom, surrounded by reporters and former Titan Corp employees seeking closure, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. Richard looked smaller somehow, defeated, as the judge handed down his sentence, 20 years in federal prison. When given the chance to speak, he glared at me and muttered bitterly, "You win, Emily. Congratulations." His words should have felt triumphant, but they didn't. Instead, I felt sadness, not for him, but for the lives destroyed by his greed. As I left the courthouse, Mia caught up with me. She quit Titan Corp months earlier, tired of corporate politics, and started her own consulting firm focused on ethical workplace practices. "Guess you've created a whole movement without even trying," she joked. I laughed, shaking my head. It wasn't just me, Mia. It was all of us standing together. That's when it hit me. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability and hope for something better. Healing takes time, doesn't it? Even after everything, there were nights when I woke up sweating, reliving the stress and fear of those months fighting Richard. Sometimes, I'd sit by Lily's bed, watching her sleep, and silently thank whatever higher power existed that she was safe. But scars remain, even when wounds heal. One day, while sorting through old boxes in my apartment, I found a photo of me and my mom from when I was a kid. We were smiling, arms around each other, looking happy despite the struggles we faced. Tears filled my eyes as I realized how much of my strength came from her. Later that week, I took Lily to Central Park for a picnic. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, leaves crunching underfoot as we walked along the paths. At one point, she grabbed my hand and said, "Mommy, are we okay now?" Her question caught me off guard, but I smiled and squeezed her fingers. "Yeah, baby. We're okay. Better than okay." In that moment, I knew we'd made it through, not unscathed, but stronger. Stronger because we'd faced the worst and refused to give up. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I gave a keynote speech at a tech conference, sharing my story and urging others to prioritize ethics over profit. Power isn't about control, I told the audience. It's about responsibility. Use your talents to uplift, not exploit. Afterward, dozens of people approached me, thanking me for inspiring them to challenge unethical practices in their own industries. Knowing I'd sparked change beyond my little corner of the world filled me with pride. At home, things were quieter, but in the best way. Lily thrived in school, her confidence growing as she realized the world wasn't as scary as it seemed during those chaotic months. And me? Well, I finally felt like I belonged somewhere. Not in a boardroom or under someone else's thumb, but in a place where I could make a difference. One evening, as fireworks lit up the Manhattan skyline during New Year's Eve, I stood on the rooftop of my building with Lily beside me. She asked, "What are you wishing for, Mom?" I smiled softly, pulling her close. "A world where kindness wins," I said, "and where people like us never stop fighting for what's right." You know, sometimes I think about how one decision can ripple outward, touching lives you'd never expect. That's what happened after Titan Corp fell. My AI healthcare platform launched successfully, gaining national recognition for its impact on underserved communities. It wasn't just tech, it was a lifeline for people who'd been ignored by traditional systems. Watching patients access affordable care through our tools reminded me why I'd fought so hard. This wasn't about revenge or ego, it was about creating something that mattered. But the real legacy wasn't mine alone. Former Titan Corp employees who joined my team share their own stories of redemption and purpose. One woman told me she'd stayed at Titan Corp for years because she thought she had no other options. "Working here makes me feel like I'm doing something meaningful," she said, tears in her eyes. Another colleague started mentoring young programmers, teaching them the importance of integrity in tech. Even Jake found his footing, leading workshops on ethical data practices. Seeing these transformations made me realize we weren't just building a better system, we were building better people. And that was worth every sleepless night. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Recently, I sat in a cafe near my office, sipping coffee and watching Lily play outside. She's growing up so fast, strong, smart, and full of curiosity. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. No more looking over my shoulder, no more wondering if Richard would come after us. Just calm. As I watched her laugh with friends, I thought about everything we'd been through, the fights, the fear, the sacrifices, and realized it had all led us here. That evening, I wrote a letter to my younger self, the girl sitting in a Queens apartment, dreaming of a better life. "Hey kid," I began. "I know things feel impossible right now. I know you're scared and tired and wondering if you'll ever catch a break. But guess what? You will. Not because the world is fair, but because you refuse to give up. Keep going. Keep fighting. Someday, you'll look back and see how far you've come." Folding the letter, I tucked it into a drawer, smiling at the thought of someday showing it to Lily. Maybe she'd need those words one day, too. The last few months have been a whirlwind of emotions, relief, gratitude, and even moments of doubt. Am I enough? Did I do enough? Questions like these still pop up occasionally, but they don't haunt me anymore. Instead, I focus on the present, helping others, raising Lily, and building a future where kindness outweighs greed. One weekend, Noah invited me to a book launch party. He'd written a memoir about exposing corporate corruption, dedicating it to all those who refused to stay silent. When he handed me a signed copy, I almost cried. On the inside cover, he'd written, "To Emily, proof that courage changes the world." Proof? Me. The idea still feels surreal, but maybe that's the point. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fears. And if my story inspires even one person to stand up against injustice, then every moment of this journey was worth it. As I stood on the rooftop overlooking Manhattan later that night, fireworks lighting up the sky, I reflected on everything that had brought me here. From Queens to Titan Corp, from betrayal to triumph, I'd faced challenges I never imagined I could overcome. Yet here I was, still standing, still fighting. Life isn't perfect, and neither am I. But perfection isn't the goal. The goal is progress. The goal is hope. So, as Lily leaned against me, watching the sparks fade into darkness, I whispered, "We did it, baby. Together."